In our last two programs, we had seen the Mansabdari system. A Mansabdar, as we had seen, was a rank holder. This system developed during the heydays of the Mughal rule. Akbar refined and perfected the system by giving two numbers to the Mansabdars. One, the Zat, which defined his position in court, and the other, the Savar, which indicated the cavalry at his command. The salaries of these officials were paid mostly from the revenue they could gather from the land assigned to them. This revenue came to be known as Jagir. Today, we shall see the Jagirdari system.
Jagirdari system and the Mansabdari system complement each other. One cannot function without the other. Both are the measures, or in other words, instruments of mobilizing the resources of the country and distributing among the nobles. We have seen in our last lecture on the Mansabdari system that a very small percentage of the high nobles and princes were consuming most of the resources of the country. How this is done, that would be seen from the Jagirdari system. Actually, Jagirdari system is the assignment of the revenue of the produce of the land. The land is never given. It is the produce that is allotted or earmarked for the noble to take from this revenue the salary that is due to him. So therefore Jagirdari system is the salary of the Mansabdar. But actually it starts after Babur and practically from the time of Akbar. Babur, after his conquest, instituted a different system called Waja, and the person who gets this Waja was called Wajdar. He has distributed 1/3 of the conquered areas to the new people, new masters, or to the old masters. Among them, the Afghans got a major share, and it is stated that under Babur, Afghans consumed 1/5 of the total revenue of the Mughal Empire at that particular time. It was after Babur that Jagir system was introduced.
There was a fundamental difference between the Wajdar system and the Jagirdari system. In the Wajdar system, there was no difference between the executive and the financial office. Under this system, an officer was given a territory with a fixed salary. He administered the area both financially and from the executive point of view. In the Jagirdari system, there was no fixed salary, and the executive and financial powers were in the hands of different persons.
But in case of Babur, perhaps this separation was coming very slowly and gradually, because in the Khalsa land, that is the land managed by the state officials for the state, we find that there were executive, Shikdar, for example, and financial officer like Dewan. There were only 4 examples during the reign of Babur of the existence of Shikdar and the Dewan in the Khalsa lands. But it was from the time of Akbar that the situation changed drastically and obviously fundamentally. The Jagirdar had several very serious problems, and some of these problems had never been resolved during the time of the Mughal Empire. The first problem was that the Jagirdar has to conform to the central rules and regulations. That is, he must collect the revenue as per sanctioned rate. That is a very serious problem, as we shall see in the second problem itself, which is linked to the first. The second problem, which I have briefly hinted during the lecture at Mansabdari system, that there is a difference between estimate of revenue and the collection of revenue. The ministry makes the estimate of revenue, which is called Jama Dami. It is called Dami because the dam is a copper coin and the revenue is estimated in dam, at least till the early days of 17th century. Yet the term continues, although after that the estimate is made in rupees. This Jamadami is therefore the estimate of the revenue to be collected from a particular Jagir. And the Jagirdar, when he collects it, it is called Hali Hasil or simply Hasil, that he collects the revenue. The problem comes that this Jamadami is less than that of the Hasil, or in other words, the estimate is different from the actual collection, and the actual collection is often much less. So in case of the Jagirdar, the principal problem lies that he cannot get the salary that is due to him.
There was a third problem. The yield from the Rabi crop and that from the Kharif crop were considered to be equal everywhere except Bengal. But that was a wrong supposition, since there were vast differences between the two crops and their yield not only in Bengal but elsewhere in the country as well. This affected the revenue collection.
But there is also another problem, very serious problem for the Jagirdar. The Jagirdar is transferable. He is transferred after, on an average, every 3 years. Now, if he is transferred in the middle of the season, then the question of the collection of revenue comes. Who will collect it? The old Jagirdar or the new Jagirdar? The ministry has made elaborate rules, elaborate procedures of such collections. But then, both the Jagirdars, the old and the new, must conform to that kind of procedure, must conform to the rules that are to be followed. In practice, this is very rarely done, and this leads to terrible difficulties, long correspondences with the ministry and so on and so forth. So the Jagirdar, if we think from an external point of view, seems to be in a very happy position with high standard of living, but he has very many real problems.
There are 4 different kinds of Jagirs: Jagiri Tankhwa, Mashrut Jagir, Inam Jagir and Watan Jagir. Each had a different type of function and revenue structure. Let us see the characteristics of each of these. First, let us take the Jagiri Tankhwa or the rupee Jagir.
This is the Jagir about which we are talking about, granted to the Mansabdar in lieu of his salary to collect from the revenue of the produce of the Jagir. In India, the tax or the revenue is never on the land during the Mughal period. It was the British who started it. In India, during the medieval period, it was always the revenue of the produce of the land. If there is no produce, there is no tax. Now, the Jagiri Tankwa, therefore, is the normal Jagir that we are talking about. And this Jagiri Tankwa is given to the Mansabdars in lieu of the salary. Besides this, the second type of Jagir is called Mashrut Jagir. Mashrut Jagir is a temporary Jagir given to a particular person for a very temporary period. When a Mansabdar is appointed to a high post with high obligations, he has to maintain a large number of cavalry. In that case, the Mansabdar gets what is known as the Mashrut Jagir, a temporary Jagir for a temporary period. Once he is transferred from that post, he does not get the Jagir at all. The third one, which is called the Inam Jagir, is generally given to the religious people for charity. And this Inam Jagir is generally for the life of the person concerned. He has no rank, that is no Zat rank, no Sawar rank, and no military obligation at all. And in most of the cases, it is free of tax. No tax is to be given by him. Jagir in his memoirs had given a large number of cases which he had granted as Inam Jagirs. As we shall see later on, some officials of the villages were also given the Inam Jagirs, but it is generally given to the religious people. The last one, the fourth one, is called Watan Jagir. Watan Jagir is that a Zamidar or a Raja, when he is absorbed into the Mansabdari system, that is, when he is made a Mansabdar, he is given a Tankwa Jagir, that is Jagiri Tankwa, and his Zamidari is considered Watan Jagir. This Watan Jagir is a hereditary one. It requires the imperial sanad for succession, and it continues in the family for a very long time, except in one or two cases. In 1679, Aurangzeb did not give the succession to Jodhpur and converted Jodhpur into a Khalisa. There was violent demonstration of the Jodhpur people, revolts, etc., etc. Now, this Watan Jagir is therefore the Jagir given for life, as well as to the succession, provided there is an imperial sanad, and therefore it is not transferable. It cannot be transferred. Man Singh, for example, under Akbar, when he was a Mansabdar, he had two Jagirs, one Jagiri Tankwa in Hisar near Punjab, and his Watan Jagir was in Ambar near Jaipur. So therefore, the Jagirs are of various types, and here we'll deal mostly with the Jagiri Tankwa, since Watan Jagir will be discussed by us later in the lecture on the Jamindari system. Now, the Jagirdar has certain rights. These rights are embodied in the order of the Wazir given at the time of the assignment. It is very clearly written. His principal functions are two. One is to collect the revenue in lieu of his salary, and two, administer the Jagir. If there is a problem in the Jagir, if there is a revolt, he can call upon the Faujdar to help him, and normally the Faujdar helps him. But there are these two principal rights of the Jagirdar, in which the collection of the revenue is the most important one. Now, in case of the Jagirdar, when he comes as a new person, there are problems for him. First of all, he does not know the area, the locality, etc. Then he does not know the tradition and customs, and therefore the Jagirdar faces certain problems. But to recount these problems and how the ministry tries to solve it, we shall see immediately after looking at the revenue of the Jagir. Unfortunately, the Jagirdari records are not available to us. Nothing has been found so far, excepting in one or two small cases. But the Khalisa records, that is the land managed by the state officials for the state, these records are available. And it is more or less presumed and accepted now that the Jagirdari model follows the model of the Khalisa. Now, Jagirdar gets revenue, or the revenue is assigned to him. This revenue is divided into various kind of units called mahal, M-A-H-A-L. The mahal is a unit of a revenue. These mahals differ from one place to another. So the Jagirdar may get 30 mahals in one place. In another place with the same salary, he may get 10. It all depends. Along with that, there are certain other taxes which are considered as separate mahals and separate Jagirs.
A tax was charged at the ports on most of the goods. It was called custom duty. The revenue from custom duty was considered to be a separate mahal of the Jagir. Let us take some examples of this kind of mahals.
One can easily give many instances. I'll give only two. The custom duties of the port of Surat was given by Shah Jahan first to his son Prince Parvez. But Parvez died soon after, and after the death of Parvez, this was given to Jahanara Begum, daughter of Shah Jahan. It is stated that this was given for her betel expenses, pan expenses. We have another instance closer at home in Hooghly. The port duty of Hooghly port was a Jagir of Shaista Khan, who was the Subadar of Bengal. So therefore, these duties are often considered as separate units and given. Similarly, excise or other taxes, which in Mughal technical terms, particularly from the 17th century, called abwab. These abwabs are often considered, but not always, considered as separate units and separate jagirs. Now, in the rights of the Jagirdars, we have a very interesting farman or order given by Aurangzeb in 1666 to an official in Gujarat whose name was Roshik Das. He was a Karori of Gujarat in charge of the revenue. Now, Aurangzeb's Farman very clearly says that the Jagirdar has all the rights, it is understood, but he cannot collect more than 50% of the land revenue. That is the revenue of the land. It must be less than 50%. Also, the Farman says that the Jagirdar should not and would not be allowed to collect taxes which are not permitted by the central government. Now, the later historian Kafi Khan, who wrote after the death of Aurangzeb, stated that the Jagirdars did not follow the second order and no punishment was given to him. Now, one of the reasons of this kind of oppression, if one likes to say it that way, is that the Jagirdar faces plenty of difficulties, as I have explained. And to solve this problem, the central government has made an administrative arrangement.
Under the Mughal Empire, the Jagirs had a very elaborate administrative setup. Basically, it consisted of three-tier contingent of officials posted at the Jagir itself. They are the staff of the Jagirdar, the local staff and the Imperial Staff. Again, the Imperial Staff contingent was further subdivided into Subadars, Faujdars and so on.
So first we see the staff of the Jagirdar. Now, in case of the Jagirdari administration, we must divide the Jagirdars into two types. One is a bigger Jagirdar and other is a smaller Jagirdar. The reason of this division is because the system of administration of the Jagir depends on the size of the Jagir. A bigger Jagirdar has a large number of officials, modeled on the staff pattern of the Khalsa, and naturally they are far more efficient and they could collect the revenue also. In case of a smaller Jagirdar, he did not have the resources to appoint a large number of officials. His officials are mainly two. One is called Amil, who is in charge of the revenue, so to speak, and the other is Fotedar, or the treasurer, the man in charge of finance. So Amil is in charge of the Jagir itself, and Fotedar is in charge of the finance. So for the smaller Jagirdar, these are the two principal officials to look after the Jagir. So what happens is, particularly from the late 17th century, when wars were going on in Rajputana and Maharashtra, the smaller Jagirdars used to give contracts of the collection of revenue to certain people, particularly some of his own troops, and also to merchants. This is called Ijara system. And this Ijara system is the system or a kind of a contract by which the collection of the revenue is made. Now, from the time of Shah Jahan, this Ijara system increased more or less. Before that, we find very rare instance of the Ijara system. Now, this is the staff of the Jagirdar, and as I have said in brief, that the bigger Jagirdars had larger number of officials, Naib, Gomasta, Amil, Fotadar, Pikes, soldiers even. The second one, the local staff, who are unaffected by the transfer, are generally two. One is the Kanungo and the other is the Chaudhuri. Kanungo is a post for life and it is hereditary, but the succession would need an imperial sanad, that is an imperial order. He may be removed only by the imperial order. The task of the Kanungo is very simple. He is actually the record keeper of the Pargana. He keeps the record, all kinds of statistics, the area, the kind of produce, different kind of land, number of people, the rate of the revenue, the sanctioned rate, the prices, market prices, and so on and so forth. So he is the repository of the information of the government, so to speak. Actually, he is a government official. In the early days of Akbar, he used to get a remuneration of 1/5 of the collection of revenue. But in the later days of Akbar, it was changed to a fixed salary. But after Akbar, it has been seen that this fixed salary, along with it, some Inam Jagir is added. So therefore, the Kanungo, who is the most important person, because he is the person who informs the Jagirdar of the local traditions and customs.